Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Brad Hairston here. Welcome to Transform Now. Today, I'm happy to have two guests on the show from Ashling Partners and SS&C Blue Prism delivery partner. Joining me are Xavier and Hanson, a partner at Ashling who has been on a couple of times before, albeit under a different company name, and Nick White, a first-time guest who heads up the data, analytics, and AI capabilities at Ashling. Welcome, Xavier and Nick. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourselves? Xavier, you go first.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, sure. So as Brad said, I'm a partner at Ashling Partners. I've been in the intelligent automation industry for a little over 10 years now. Started primarily in banking, currently located in New York and Manhattan, despite the accent. I haven't kicked the Brooklyn accent just yet. I guess my focus these days with Ashling Partners is really around, BFSI and starting to branch into some of the manufacturing side that we've got over here at Ashling, but we can kind of get to that in a second. So that's my background. Been around for a long time, as you pointed out, Brad, and very, very much enjoying my new life at Ashling.
Awesome. Nick, why don't you go?
Yeah, great to meet you, Brad. I'm new to this automation game. I have about 20 years experience in data and analytics, data science. So I've worked at companies such as Altria, IRI, Circana, Nike. I did work at Kin + Carta in the consulting space as well. I joined Ashling to help grow the analytics data and AI towers. So starting to embed more of those practices into our everyday automation.
Fantastic. And Nick, I was looking at your profile just yesterday, and I found a little gem in there that you didn't mention. It looks like you spent a little time at Second City in Chicago, the nationally famous comedy troupe. Is that right?
I did. I worked there and performed for a while. Some of the folks that I see that are way funnier than I, Tim Baldwin on The Righteous Gemstones, A.D. Bryant was on SNL,
Wow.
Nicole Black. These were all people I was kind of running with that were just much better than I, just like Xavier is.
I was going to say, I can see that. I didn't know that, Nick, but I can see that now. You're one of the funniest people I've met. So that tracks. Yeah.
I loved finding that. And I'm a big fan. I actually went to Second City probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm a big fan of sketch comedy in general. So, but we're not here to talk about comedy. We're here to talk about automation and AI and analytics and all those great things going on in the market. Xavier, let's start this dialogue with you. So you were obviously a leader at Reveal Group, and last year Reveal integrated with Ashling Partners. How has this expanded your vertical reach as well as your geographical reach? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So, maybe just a very brief history lesson on Reveal to make this land, but we were originally an Australian headquartered company. About 7 years ago, we moved over to the US to expand here. Over time and through the pandemic, unfortunately, the Australian company shut down. So we became, hyper-focused in North America here. And then, and at the same time, we didn't really have an offshore or global model. We were all onshore, and our industry spread was largely health services, and BFSI. So that was sort of our jam where we were really, really strong. The beauty of Ashling Partners is they have, we came together and had a lot more BFSI knowledge, but I think really being introduced to the manufacturing, supply chain, oil and gas and utilities side of things, where Ashling is the strongest and has a lot of depth and expertise was a huge part of the reason that we're working so well together. Another part is the global model. So I kind of hinted at that by saying we were very concentrated in North America before. So yeah, we have offices in Romania, in Mexico, in India, in Australia again, would you believe? And that gives us the ability to service larger global footprint clients, as well as more regional organizations as well. So we have some famous Australian brands that mean a lot to me, but not too much to my North American compatriots here in Ashling Partners. But every time I hear the name, I'm like, oh, that's great. So that's really been impressive. And I think there's sort of beyond the industry and vertical piece, as well as the global spread. People like Nick didn't exist in Reveal Group. We weren't able to have a dedicated AI lead. We didn't have the advisory group that we have at Ashling as well. So we have manufacturing experts. We have true BFSI experts, not just me pretending in the sandpit here. So it's been really, really great to have access to those experts, and it changes the dialogue we have with our customers and clients because they're talking the talk. They understand the challenges facing those industries, and we can come in with the sort of right solution to fit, as opposed to chasing a technology, which, we've been guilty of in the past.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Nick, from your perspective, what differentiates Ashling in the market?
Yeah, so I was coming off a few years working in custom application development and data science. What I would say is in those spaces, there are some big swings. There are a lot of big ideas. There are very little things that make it to production. So coming into automation space, what's interesting to me is we can use AI right away. I mean, there's no need to do a ton of change management. What we're actually doing is helping robots be smarter with AI. And having spent the previous 2-3 years doing Gen AI POCs, which never went to production because there wasn't an end goal in mind, it is refreshing to be around a space where outcomes are at the forefront. And obviously the positions that the Reveal Group had with Blue Prism, it's nice to be in a space where it's a tight-knit community, and it's also just super, super actionable use of data and insights in AI.
This reminds me of a conversation I had last week with a colleague. He was talking about there's so much focus on upskilling human workers, which needs to happen for sure. But we need to upskill the digital workers too. We've lost focus on the importance of upskilling both labor pools. And as you said, Nick, it's so pervasive. And we've gotten into a mode now where we can add AI skills at a very, very rapid pace. So it is exciting what's going on. Let's talk about some of the industries that the new Ashling Partners is very focused on. I know you work in many different sectors, but let's focus on the big three: financial services, healthcare, and manufacturing. And I'd like you guys to share your thoughts on what you're seeing in those industries. What are some of the top trends and opportunities around automation and AI? Xavier, let's start with financial services. You named yourself the BFSI guy, so we got to start there.
Yes, no, one of many. So it wouldn't surprise you, but everybody's trying to understand what to do with AI, right? Like everybody's getting pressure from boards, from shareholders to make sure they're doing something with it, and that message gets filtered down very, very differently through an organization. So, do we do a POC? Kind of to Nick's point, how do we get something out of this, and how do we think about that? So a lot of the challenges specific to BFSI sort of go down that road. I guess the thing that we're doing the most, and then where Nick's been the most helpful too with Ashling, is kind of doing education circuits. So we'll go around to our BFSI clients and talking, here's what we're really talking, like defining terms. Here's what we're really talking about when it comes to AI versus agentic versus generative, all that sort of thing. Here are the kind of foundational levels and layers you need to have in place to actually get benefit out of what you're trying to achieve here. And I think when it comes to BFSI specifically, there are use cases that we really want to chase down, like KYC, right? Know your customer stuff is always a challenge, but it's always a bit nebulous. There's a lot of unstructured data. There's different sources of information that you can pull. There's interpreting that information, all that sort of thing. And loan origination is very similar. You've got lots of, documents that you need to work through that, again, unstructured. So trying to hit some of those use cases that we've been unable to hit previously with existing technologies and take them in. Now, the thing around BFSI is also regulation and risk tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost 80% of the processes that go through a BFSI, organization, whether insurance or banking, aren't going to want to hand the keys over to a bot and say, give me an outcome. It's just not how these places work. You know, you need everything audited, you need everything logged, all the decisions, everything has to be very, very clear. I mean, if you think back 10 years when we started with RPA, all the banks were scared of all the things that these bots were going to do because they were going to run off and do their own stuff. This is actually truly what's going to happen this time this year if you don't control it and govern it. So a lot of the focus and rhetoric isn't just use cases of BFSI, but also governance and security and making sure you've got all those layers in place. Otherwise, their Westfield will come true. So you kind of need to help educate there, which, like I said, it feels like 10 years ago when RPA was first coming on the scene, where we were just doing the rounds, educating people on what the truth was versus the marketing, and then how to think about actually implementing in your organization in a safe and secure way. So,
Okay. Nick, why don't we cover manufacturing? I know that's a vertical that Ashling has really had a lot of focus on. Talk about that industry, if you would.
Yeah. So having worked in manufacturing as well as retail and, consumer packaged goods, whatever we want to call it, we're making stuff, we're selling stuff, right? Data has always been a huge part of that. Forecasting, planning, in-season optimization, these are very common things that have occurred. People have failed and failed again because they keep skipping the quality of the data. However, what I would say is when we think about the future of manufacturing, some of the new use cases we're seeing is, how do we better do preventative maintenance? How do we make it easier to make sure that our machinery, our capacity, not only is it planned and forecasted, but it goes as planned and forecasted. So we're seeing uses of AI and natural language, understanding in spaces such as maintenance, right? If I can walk around, have a device and have quick access to what the manual says to do, or I can use computer vision to diagnose what's going wrong with the machine. These are places where now manufacturing is really starting to lean in. I would also say we're seeing the amount of customer service use cases in that space. Just chatbot hell is gone. Now we have chatbots that can actually help, right? Instead of sitting there, not getting answers and then calling even more upset than you were, we're seeing a lot of, hey, we're resolving things. We're having caller quick times, call times. That is all about efficiency. And that's where we're seeing a ton of use of AI.
I, for one, am in support of chatbot hell going away. Yes. Thank you. Xavier, back to you. Let's talk about healthcare. I know this is a favorite for you. And you guys have done a ton of work in that space. So what do you see happening in healthcare these days?
Yeah, it's a broad industry too. So, we can include payers, providers in that as well. I think on the payer side, one of my client resources once said, all we do around here is process claims. So if you can do anything to improve claim processing in any way, shape or form, then you're helping our business. So I've taken that to heart. Usually when we're working with payers, that is very much the focus. It's a lot of healthcare, again, I mean, not to keep belaboring a point, but a lot of the larger payers have gone through the intelligent automation lifecycle now for quite a long time. And so that low-hanging fruit is gone, the easy, high volume, transactional, structured data stuff. So it's how do you get that next layer? And a lot of, complex claims involve a doctor or a nurse or something like that, and they are high cost, very, very skilled resources who could be doing other things better. So how do you inject some sort of, even if it's generative, to summarize information for people to shorten the amount of touch time they have to have on a claim, or vice versa, their response, can be summarized and, you can use generative engine for that, like little things like that, where it's human augmentation as opposed to human replacement, which is what, we've sort of seen in the past with insurers and all that sort of thing. On the provider side, very similar. Anything to do with rev cycle management is always a big one for those guys. So getting in there, again, it's a lot of unstructured information coming in and trying to make sure that we put that out. I mean, you've probably noticing the theme here is a lot of those first cuts have been done with the structured stuff. It's any semi-structured, unstructured, human augmentation efficiency plays. That's where we're really focusing on in every industry, and healthcare is just the same.
Okay. Thanks for that survey of those three verticals.
Yeah.
Nick, you lead data analytics and AI, three significantly important areas. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for Ashling to help companies right now in that space?
I mean, it's back to basics for me. It's how do we answer questions that need answering with data? And whether we're helping a robot answer those or we're helping a human answer those, there's still a ton of white space there. One of our hottest areas that we work in is process intelligence and mining. And it's kind of one of those things like, I walk in and I go, well, duh, why aren't we doing this? Or why wouldn't we, set a baseline, understand what that baseline's aiming to do, and then measure the outcome of that baseline and then make adjustments? To me, that's data-driven thinking. So one of the biggest ways, and it's not sexy, like a robot that can see and do things, but it's basic. It is basic, and it allows you to unlock other things. Now, Xav mentioned it, but the use of AI in understanding unstructured data that is a low-hanging fruit. When we talk about healthcare, I think most questions that, payers will actually get is, what is my deductible? Do you know that those things can cost like $18 a call? And if they're 80%, look at the savings right there. Now, how do we use it for better health outcomes is the next thing. But I think we're starting to see, hey, let's structure unstructured data, which I've been arguing for a while, and it's the worst thing. Nobody wants to do it. But now we can do it quicker. So the idea of getting to actual insights and making better decisions over time is becoming more accessible through AI. But we're still seeing a ton of heat around, where are the issues in my process? And, sometimes that can be desk research. Sometimes you just look at logs to get more of a objective view of it. So those are places we see a ton of work right now.
You mentioned tapping into unstructured data, being able to draw insights from that. Certainly one area of technology innovation that has really advanced in that space is around Gen AI. And Xavier, I know you and your team have done a lot of work with generative AI, including connecting that capability to digital workers and process automation. Tell me how all that has evolved over the past couple of years. Curious to know if most customers are kind of gravitating to a common set of use cases for Gen AI.
Yeah. How's it changed over the years is probably a good place to start. So obviously we come in with a bit of a bias. We're usually involved with the intelligent automation program. That means, our intelligent automation COEs that we are engaging with. So when we come in with generative AI, we have a tool set that can execute, within systems on human behalf. So you're not necessarily needing to interact with a ChatGPT bot as a human being to integrate that into your solution, because we have bots that can make those calls already. And so a lot of the use cases we've been working on have involved in some way, shape or form, leveraging an LLM to almost last mile the data structuring, right? As soon as you get data into a structured format, then we can go and do whatever with it in the source system. Ultimately, that's where we're heading, and where a lot of the use cases around generative AI have headed. So a couple of good examples. We have an IDP engine pulling down a whole bunch of tables of stock purchase agreements. And none of those tables look the same. They have the same data in them, like in terms of raw data, and roughly structured the same. Table headers are very different. They might be in different places on the page. So the IDP and OCR engines are actually good at extracting that information very accurately, but trying to then transpose that into something consistent that you can put in a database that makes it useful. That's the bit we're using an LLM for, to kind of normalize table headers. Occasionally, if there's an address in a paragraph, we'll pull that out as part of that kind of stock transfer agreement and all that sort of thing. So, it's that part of a larger puzzle, because an LLM by itself, as you well know, doesn't have the arms and legs to do a lot of the things you need to actually do with that information. So that's sort of how the kind of angle of attack we've come at, both because of the kind of organizations and where we are within the organizations. Plus, we have the access to those tools. So that's sort of how we're seeing it. I guess what we're starting to see, and it's, it's yet to really get a lot of traction is a lot of those agentic pieces being built so that the AI can do things without the RPA, which is, or at least, as part of the RPA. So that's sort of coming to market. I wouldn't say that's there yet, but that's what we're starting to see and what we're starting to prepare for. And again, for us, yes, technology is important, but I always come back to governance. How do you scale these things? How do you monitor them? How do you find the right use cases? All of that sort of stuff. So that's always a huge help. Well,
and Xavier, are you finding that companies are starting to leverage more models than fewer to solve some of their complex problems?
I might let Nick answer that one, but I mean, from my perspective, not really, because there's we've had a very limited set in terms of use cases, and also, publicly trained LLMs are danger. So anything that you can put on a private cloud or control yourself is usually preferred. But I don't know, Nick, what have you seen sort of in the market from a model proliferation perspective?
Well, bigger's not always better. I think people are figuring that out. It's one of the things that, look, the paradigm shift happened when these large foundational models became public. And thank you, OpenAI, for forcing Google and Facebook and everybody else to do that. Now, if you look to what those companies are actually doing with their models, is they're shrinking them and they are orchestrating different services around them. So the things that we start to call models end up being orchestrated agents, basically. And that's why we're hearing all of this agentic AI buzz right now. When I do encounter folks, a lot of the low hanging fruit, it's okay. Like, let's jam GPT-4 in there or Gemini, whatever. But if you really want to make a difference and you really want competitive advantage, you need to think about, we don't have to go to the dark ages when I was actually coding and build our own model, but let's take a smaller model. Let's distill it. Let's fine tune it. Let's make it know our business. We're starting to see people hit the pain of using these big black boxes, because that's what they are. Is GPT-4 read the internet? Great. Terrific. You've read other things. You understand other things. You're making predictions based on that. Is that the best use case for a healthcare payer trying to figure out if this person qualifies to use this medication? Probably not. It's a very smart genius, but it's a 5-year-old genius. Can we just get somebody very smart in a domain to help us do work? And we are starting to see, we have a few clients that they've used the agent frameworks. They've used the big models, and they are asking a question: how do we make it more human? That's a weird question to ask, but it's also, it's a little scary, whatever. But at the end of the day, you make it more human by having it interact and learn from humans versus just learn from itself. So, Brad, we haven't seen a huge shift to it. It's something I bring up whenever we engage with clients. Like, do you need that? Or could you use a smaller one? But people are definitely feeling the pain and they're going, why isn't this working? And some folks are like, well, wait for the model to get better. I think that's a false narrative. You need to take a smaller one, make it domain specific, and leverage it across the board.
Nick, that raises another question in my mind. You've talked about kind of going back to the basics. Is the urgency around enterprise AI and moving toward more automation and agentic AI and things like that, it helping or enabling companies to finally recognize the sometimes dismal shape of their data?
As a guy who did data governance at Nike at a place that couldn't care less about data, I can say with confidence, absolutely not. Now, Xav might not know this because of his Australian roots, but there is that famous Peanuts scene where Lucy keeps pulling the football away from Charlie. He tries to kick it, right?
Right.
This is what people have been doing with data for the 20 years I've been in it is, no, like I can just go. And it's like, no, if the football's not teed up and held correctly, this is American football, Xav. then you can't actually kick a field goal. So again, people are running into not only, oh, why isn't this ginormous model fixing all my problems, but also looking to, okay, the model should be smaller and I need to at least annotate or bring my unstructured data into a semi-structured state. And people are still resistant because it is, again, it is the last thing anybody wants to do. But I've always gone, my time in data governance and quality, I always go back to, my thesis, which is if you define in words what a data thing is supposed to be, you know when it's good, you know when it's bad, and you know what to use it for. And people still run away from that. But that's the only way. That's a very functional thing. We're just trying to, like Xavier said earlier, we're trying to fix process and contextual problems with technology. And those things happen out in the world. The nice thing is AI is putting eyes, ears, feet, hands into digital robots, but it's still not, those robots don't get better without our help.
Very true. Xavier, let's talk about process orchestration. How has your expansion into this space impacted the way that you guys go to market and the way you help customers solve their core process issues?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's funnily enough, kind of going back to where I started all those years ago in operational excellence a little bit, because the only way that you can apply process orchestration is to get out of that task automation mode and really understand what businesses are trying to achieve. We used to call it service catalogs back in the day, a sort of horizontal chain, making a patty the task, making a Big Mac is your service sort of way of thinking. And I think it changes our go-to-market because we have to have those conversations. We're having to have, what are you trying to achieve organizationally? And it comes back to what Nick was saying before around process mining and process intelligence. That is how we have to get the information to be able to have, these transformational conversations. So what it's done is kind of elevated the discussion we're having. You can obviously involve and have to involve the traditional intelligent automation COEs, but you've also got to, engage the CI and operational excellence teams. You've got to make sure that you're talking to the COO and the CFO, because they're the ones who, CFO is going to fund it. COO it's going to affect their core business the most. Those sorts of conversations. So it's very much changed that. Again, more education does lengthen the sales cycle, as you can imagine, for a consulting firm when you're trying to chase those bigger picture ideas. But it's it's certainly, where we're headed, because we've got, the industry expertise and the kind of process side of things in our organization, but also, the technology, the chops to know which hammer to hit with which, hit which nail with which hammer and all that sort of thing. So we're in a very unique position to be able to solve that problem and use all of that information. It's just changed the conversations we're having and who we're having them with is probably the big kick up in orchestration.
Yeah. When I talk to customers, I always like to make the point, no matter how much you automate in a process, there's always going to be steps that humans are involved in or are responsible for. And putting the most holistic end-to-end management structure around that is always going to be a huge value driver. Yeah, I'm a big believer in process orchestration now, and I wish more companies would start with orchestration and then go to automation. Unfortunately, it's kind of happened in reverse with many companies, but certainly we're seeing that come together.
No, to use the word unsexy again, it's not the sexiest thing to say, but really we're still talking about process efficiency. That never changed. We've been doing it for 30, 40 years. It's just how we solve the problems changed a little bit. And that's the bit that we're kind of,
And as the outsider, the craziest thing to me is we talk about process and we talk about tasks and we talk about automating all of this. I've never seen a flow chart without a diamond where there is a decision point, and decisions are informed by data. So it's natural that, okay, let's really define the processes, the tasks, the decisions, the data holistically that we need to pull this off. And then let's make sure that we're, it's the whole adage of, thinking big and starting small. It's okay to start at a task level,
right?
But if you're not building the right thing the right way, your extensibility and the amount of value and speed to value is very limited. That is a fact. So you don't have to completely automate your supply chain, but you should at least know what that looks like so that when you attack the first task or you build the first model to answer the first question, you're at least have that big picture in mind, because that doesn't change, right?
Right.
You're making things, you're getting things to make things, you're selling things. It's very simplistic, but for some reason we want to make it narrower, yet more complex, which is so antithetical to me.
Yeah. Agentic AI's come up a couple times in this conversation. Nick, why don't you speak to how is Ashling advising your customers in this space? Is the hype real?
Meet the old boss, same as the new boss, Is the hype real? Sure. I mean, the way that I've been thinking about it in my head is RPA brings in task level automation. Great. We can automate tasks. When we put AI on it, now we can start to automate processes because there's a little bit more decision intelligence inherent in the digital robot. Now, if we start to bring in, and this piggybacks off of process orchestration, what about service orchestration? That's not going away. It never has. RPA's always been one way to do that. It is a service orchestrator, but we've had these things in different areas. But why are we bringing APIs in? Why are we bringing ETL in? Why aren't we bringing streaming and IoT information in? So I think from an agentic standpoint, hey, it's a marketing term, great, but it's really just signaling, and it is derivative of the agent frameworks that LangChain, OpenAI, everybody is having, right?
Right.
The hype is real, but it's not a plug and play. It still comes down to, do I understand my holistic processes so that I can get to a place where now, instead of task automation, RPA, process automation, RPA plus AI, I get to something like outcome automation, which is what I would call agentic, which is where I can say, hey, I need you to go do this and figure this thing out. And now it has access. So I've always simplified it to, now we're putting feet on robots so that they can walk around and talk to other robots and use the services that are needed. Now, the big picture still that we need to build to is I've created an actual virtual employee that can just define outcomes based on a vision, based on knowing what they're supposed to do, define the processes and the task, and take care of it all. So the hype is real. We see people doing it. It's still, we're still running into this. Okay, are we just trying to replace ERP systems now with agentic AI? That is going to be the test, is like, let's not build something unless actually is a competitive advantage, right? So as, platforms like Salesforce bring in Agentforce, there's going to be a balance there. All I'll say is the hype is real, but the hype was never it's always been the same. So to me, it's just, all right, we're moving on. We think we can do something greater and grander as a result of having previous technology experience.
Great. Well put. Thank you. Xavier, why don't you wrap us up today with a recent customer solution that you guys have engineered, something that brings many of these things together?
Sure. I won't use the table-headed data normalization one because I've already done that. So I'll dig into the bag and see what else I can pull out, Brad. So I guess I get actually similar example, same kind of stream of thought in terms of how we designed it, but an organization who needed to, because of a regulation shift, needed to understand thousands and thousands of leases for their properties. And they were spread across various leasing organizations because they were global, right? So you got leases from all over the world. And we needed to get about 30 pieces of information out of those leases consistently to put into a source system that allowed reporting, which was the regulation requirement, right? So it was sort of the pain that we saw. We tried a few different ways of tackling this one. Nick knows very well how much time we spent on it internally and probably didn't make it much money out of it. We solved the problem. We spent the kind of end game solution was really to bring in an IDP technology. I believe in this case with Abby. We use that to both classify the documents and also to effectively create some structure. So with the leasing documents, sections are relatively kind of consistent. So we could extract those consistently. What is different and what is semi-structured or unstructured is each paragraph under each section for each lease, because it's, usually legal mumbo jumbo and there's 3 or 4 data points you need from that. Now, originally we tried to throw LLM at it. We tried ChatGPT and said, here's the lease, give me these pieces of information. Couldn't track entities very well. You would pull out the name 3 out of the 7 times it was mentioned in the leasing document if you're looking for the leasee, or it would mix them up halfway through because it's just too much information that it was trying to digest, for lack of a better term. So the kind of mix there was to use the IDP tool to both classify and then extract chunks of the lease, simplifying it a lot here, and then have the LLM examine each one of those sort of subset pieces to extract the information we needed. And our throughput rate was much, much, much higher, like orders of magnitude higher than the IDP could have achieved by itself or the LLM could have achieved by itself. So use those two together. And obviously the orchestration layer was RPA there. We had Blue Prism sitting over the top to move everything around, present information to end users as required, and obviously to push data into the source systems once it was all cleaned up. So very, very cool application of a whole bunch of technologies, and a lot of fun designing that one in a room with a whiteboard, my old school days where we're all in together in a room together, Brad, as opposed to being virtual, which was nice as well.
Can you speak at least at a high level to the benefits that the customer is
so
seeing?
they would have had to hire workers to do all of that sort of thing, and then they're also on the kind of continuous dates that are required, right? Because they're getting new properties all the time, or they're turning them over, or they're renewing leases, and all of that information has to be reapplied. So there was a backlog component where they didn't have to hire 50 workers to go and put all this information in originally, and then they don't have to have a team of 5 to 10 people now running that and continuously updating those new leases come through the organization. So, we're talking a global, you would know this brand if you heard it, but I'm not allowed to say it, kind of organization, and they have a very significant problem solved for them. Where Nick was going before too on the, just if you can do explanation of benefits in any insurance organization using some sort of similar application, there's huge benefit there because to Nick's point, what's my deductible? Well, it's in your EOB most of the time.
Right.
Just need to go get that information out. So lots of applications are very similar, semi-structured documents and information that we can use.
Perfect. Well, Xavier and Nick, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Nick, it was very nice to meet you, and really enjoy hearing about what Reveal Group now looks like as a part of Ashling. You guys bring in your capabilities and your industry experience and your advisory experience together. That's a pretty powerful combination. So congratulations to both of your companies, and look forward to seeing where it goes from here. But thanks for being with me, and I wish you both the very best.
Thanks, Brad. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.